Hey gang, my name is John. I'm a recovered alcoholic and drug addict. And today I thought we would talk about relationships because it's so easy to talk about relationships. Whoa! I think relationships are easy because we all have them, except like healthy relationships. They're the hard part. So that's kind of going to be the conversation today. What are relationships? How do I have them in a healthy way? Lots of us have unhealthy relationships. So I wanted to kind of start with the problem as we see it, the problem that is within me. I look at the symptom of the problem. So I have this symptom called drugs and alcohol. And what happens to me is very different than other people. So when I drink or do drugs, it does something inside of me that causes me to do it more and more. And so once I put these substances in my body, I have an abnormal reaction, which produces a craving for more. It might sound silly to you, but alcohol does something different to me than other drinkers. And so I don't compare myself to non-drinkers. I compare myself to drinkers. And so what it does inside of me, it actually produces this need for more of it. So the more I drink, the thirstier I get. I drink number 3. I thought that would be the quencher, the thirst quencher, and then I go into number 5 and 6, and I keep getting thirstier. It's a really pain in the butt because I never get that thirst quenched. I just need more and more and more. And upon bad results, negative consequences, I say I will never do this again, or I'll do it differently. I will try to control it differently. And so I don't bring my credit card. I don't drive. Although all of those things are really workaroundable. It's easy to untrap yourself. And so that's what I found is that I kept untrapping myself. I would go and go to the pub or go to the pool hall, and I would just be meeting some friends, and I would go home. I would need to go home for 10, I would say, because that's a reasonable night out on a school night. I mean, on a work night. And so I would change my mind at about, it was about 9:54, and I would start changing my mind of like, well, there's new people here. We're not quite done our game. Maybe I'll just have one more drink. And I start to get panicky inside. And I think the next drink looks like a pitcher. And so, it's in one jug, so it's one drink. So I have to drink that. And I keep changing my mind. And and this is a symptom of what the alcohol is doing within me. I'm not really changing my mind. I actually have no control over it. Then I get in trouble. I don't show up to work, or I show up hungover. I'm doing these things that I don't want to do. But the other part of this is that I have this mental part that brings me back to it. Even though I said I'll never do it, I've promised 100 times. I might have even got some help for it, or talked to, a minister or somebody. I might have even gone to jail, which, yeah, that's happened. I've been in the drunk tank. I've been to jail a couple times for dumb stuff. And it's like, I will never do that again, or I'll just do it differently. And so this is the mental part that always brings me back to the physical. So just to simplify it, it's when I start to do these activities, I can't stop, and then when I stop, I keep starting again. And so I look at it like my wife has a severe peanut allergy, but she didn't at one point in her life. She was eating glorious peanut butter sandwiches. I love peanut butter sandwiches, peanut butter and Ritz crackers. Like those, that's a staple that I could live off, literally live off of. Like I could eat Ritz crackers, peanut butter, maybe a bit of cheese, and milk. That's really all I would need on some abandoned island. I could get away. I know that there's people that are in this room that can relate to me. But my wife used to do that, live in the glory of peanut butter. And then she had an adverse reaction to it, and her face blew up, and she couldn't breathe very well. And over the course of a number of years and decades, she became anaphylactic. Sometimes when it's in the air, she has to leave the restaurant or the kitchen that it's in. And so that's what's happened to me. I was born with it. I will never be cured of the physical allergy to it, the physical abnormality that isn't present in most people that drink. But what I really have is I do have relief from it. So that's really where I wanted to go with this and talk about it. So that's really the symptom of the problem. And so in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, this is how we would qualify somebody: is if, when honestly want to, you cannot quit entirely, or if when drinking you have little control over the amount you take, you are probably alcoholic, or fill in the blank. If that be the case, you may be suffering from illness which only a spiritual experience will conquer. And so if you're somebody that is allergic to peanut butter, and you keep doing it and doing it, we would all just be like, well, that's just silly. Like, just stay away from the peanut butter. Like, don't go into the, like, whatever's happening, just stop it. That's the same with my addiction, is that I can't just stop it, because there's a root to the problem that brings me back to it. So you have this physical part that is being driven by this mental part. If I got rid of the mental part, then I'd be okay. And so this mental part is actually centered in the mind, but driven by my spirit. And so the real problem is spiritual. And then that's what it says here, is that if you are suffering from this description, then only a spiritual experience will conquer. So the problem is lack of power. I just keep going to the peanut butter. I keep going to the pub. I keep going to hang out with these friends, and all of a sudden alcohol gets poured down my throat. It's just ridiculous. I don't know how that happens. And then I keep changing my mind, making new decisions and new choices. But the reality is, this addiction, this substance, has taken away my ability to choose anything. So it says we lack power. That's our dilemma. We had to find a power greater by which we could live, and it had to be a power greater than ourselves, obviously. But where and how are we going to find it? That's exactly what this process is all about. That's what this book is about, is enable its reader, its doer, to find a power greater than yourself, which will solve your problem. That's why, that means we have written a book, we believe, spiritual as well as moral. And what they're talking about is entering into the spiritual life. We come from the physical life, the emotional life, and we want to tap into the spiritual life. So what they're suggesting is that I am spiritually sick. My spiritual sickness is rooted in the foundation of fear. Fear is the igniter of this mental obsession that outweighs all other thinking, which leads me to the symptom that is hiding my problem. So all of these things is the solution to my problem. And so my problem is spiritual at nature. We look at this problem, you can see it as being irritable, restless, discontent. It's just itchy, twitchy, and something else. And it's like my dog tries to get comfortable on a chair with a blanket, and she keeps going around in circles. And the other day we were watching the hockey game, and I was like, sit down, like just okay, there it is, there, just. And she gets back up, and then she goes spinning around again. And it's like we're cheering at the hockey game, but yelling at the dog. Me and my son are like ready to take bets on when she's going to sit down. Then she finally gets comfortable, takes a big sigh, blows everybody a little dog kiss, and then stands up again and tries to get under the blanket. That's what's inside of me. Before I ever took a drink, that's how I acted inside. That's what was going inside of me. And so when we look at this problem, we can see it kind of written out on page 52 of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. This is describing the spiritual unrest that I have, the spiritual dilemma that I have. And so what's happened is, in the spiritual realm, there's always consent. There has to be consent. And so what happens is, through our wounding, through our parents, our family of origin, teachers, friends, all of this stuff that's happened, all of these incidences and experiences that happen, the enemy comes in the form of fear and says these words. The enemy always has a message behind all of these incidences. And so what happens is the enemy comes in and whispers in our ear, you can never trust authority. See what happened? Oh, you're so bad. You get a spanking every day. Like, oh my goodness. And then And then I come into this agreement with the enemy saying, yeah, like authority can't be trusted. And then I make these vows and I make these promises, I make these principles and values that I rest my life on. And through the course of years, it's just a weight, and I'm actually being driven by fear. And what I need to come into is consent with God's love to come out from under the real problem, the slave driver of fear, which puts me in motion. And so now I get to come into God's love through this process. And so this is where the enemy of fear is driving my life in, and this is how it looks in the bedevilments. We were having trouble with personal relationships. We couldn't control our emotional natures. We were prey to misery and depression. We could not make a living. We had a feeling of usefulness. We were full of fear. We were unhappy. We couldn't seem to be of real help to people. Was not a basic solution to these bedevilments more important than whether we should see newsreels of lunar flight? Of course it was. When we saw others solve their problem, so alcohol is not my problem, this is my problem. This being driven by fear in every aspect of my life is my problem. When we see others solve their problems by a simple reliance, not just a relationship, but a reliant relationship upon the spirit of the universe, we can stop doubting the power of God. Our ideas did not work, but the God idea did. And so this is really, I wanted to open up the conversation on relationships. Like there's a lot of parts of the bedevilments, of the spiritual problem that takes place. But how about in my relationship, in my relationship? So in my experience, I've seen women do better with relationships. They have a lot more of them. Maybe they don't do better. They have a lot more of them. They love relationships. They think relationships are part of air and breathing. My woman in my life, my wife, she for time off needs to go see people and connect with people, and I'm like, oh, barbecue sounds overwhelming. Will there be people there? And so I think women love to have relationships a little bit more than men, at least more than me. But we have relationships in every aspect of our life, and where what I need to do is bring God's spirit of love into them all so that they can all be healthy. And so we start to get doing some digging in this thing that we called inventory. And so in the inventory process, we get to see what my conduct is. So in the latter half of the inventories, we look at this as relationship inventory. So if you've done the 12 steps, if you've done any inventory work, this is a beautiful process, which I think most of us have got it wrong, where I looked at this sex inventory as just sexual relationships. But the reality is it's male and female relationships. So our personal relationships is really what we want to look under. So we talk about in the big book on page 69, it says, what can we do about them? We've reviewed our own conduct over the past years. Where had I been selfish, dishonest, inconsiderate? Whom had I hurt? Did I unjustifiably arouse jealousy, suspicious, or bitterness? And that's not in them, that's in me. I'm taking my own inventory. Where were we at fault? What should I have done instead? We got all of this down on paper and looked at it. And so a little while later, it says, whatever the idea. So I'm asking God to write an ideal. We ask God to mold our ideals and to help us live up to them. So really what we want to do is in all of our relationships, and you might be thinking of like some crazy relationships that you have now that there's no restoration, it's not even possible, or you're just having a tough time at home. You've been sleeping on the couch, whatever it is. Maybe you've got some rough relationships at work. I want to open it up to being like, we have relationships with our phone. We have relationships with our car. They all boil down to really my relationships with the world around us. And how does God want me to be present in them? So I really get to look at my conduct as God's image bearer. So what I'm going to do is in my inventory of the relationship inventory, the conduct inventory, the sex inventory, the soul tie inventory, whatever you want to call it, I'm actually going to see how I have had unhealthy relationships in all of my activities. This doesn't negate, for a lot of this, it isn't resentment inventory. This is something else where I've actually connected with people and I've done it in unhealthy ways. So when we're going through this process, we get to see where we've connected with people in unhealthy ways, how we've done it, why we've done it, what's been motivating us. So we get to see the driving fears. And then we get to see, why am I overindulgent in this kind of relationship? Why am I doing this in this kind of relationship? Whether that's food, whether that's with my body, whether that's with my social media, my people at work, the kind of car that I drive, whatever, the physique that I desire, all of that stuff is, do I have a healthy relationship with it? And if God is truly my director, my father, my principal, like, I am the representation of this relationship, and the relationship comes on the inside, what does God want me to do about it? What does God want me to know about this relationship as I move in to show him the cesspool that I've had inside of here? And this is what recovery is. It's recovering this experience that Adam and Eve had in the Garden of Eden, that temple imagery, the garden imagery, where I walk hand in hand with the Father. I have conscious contact with God. And as I said at the beginning, there's no pill or solution that they have to this addiction, but what we have is, we have a contingency plan based on a daily reprieve of through our conscious contact with God, our relationship with God, our dependence and reliance on the God that we get to be in a relationship with, and he runs our life. And so this is what I am now being guided to do, is that I get to bring God into this. I make a list of all of the unhealthy relationships. I fill it out, and at the very bottom it says, what should I have done instead? So this is how God's going to give me a job description. This is how God wants me to be present in every relationship, because if he truly lives in here and he's breathing new life into me, I get to be his representation of what love looks like, what joy looks like, what peace looks like, what unity looks like, all of these things. And if I don't have a template, if I don't have a job description, do I really have all that of God inside of me? Or maybe there's something wrong. Maybe God doesn't really live inside of me. So as he lives inside of me, he has say in where and what I'm doing. This is part of the spiritual life of coming into consent with God's love. I was an agent of fear. Now I'm an agent of love. So we look at this ideal and we're asking God, what should I have done instead? And in our workbook, this is a thing that I found in Alcoholics Anonymous. We have these 4 absolutes, really listening to God's voice. We've kind of talked about an understanding of how we have this cast of characters. It's not the 98% that's going to save me. It's that 2% that's going to kill me. In my experience, God actually has left the cast of characters there. They're not who I am. They're not my identity, but they speak to me on a daily basis. So I got those words coming from me left and right, and they're whispering and cheering me or booing me, whatever it is, trying to get me in motion. And having that there is a good reminder that I need God on a daily basis. And so how am I partnering with God to set my ideals of how to be present? Well, I look at 4 classes of this. I look at the character of God in absolute honesty, unselfishness, love, and purity. And so honesty is, there's no twilight zone in honesty. It's a conscious state of mind that sees the truth and the reality. And so God is truth. The only person that I lie to nowadays really is myself. I say that I'm going to work out and I don't. I make these excuses, blah, blah, blah. I let myself down. God has never let me down. God has never left or forsaken me. God is always with me. God is absolute truth and honesty. And then I look at unselfishness. So as I'm writing my ideal with him, what should I have done instead? I'm inviting this character of absolute honesty into all of my character. This is this stock and trade, kind of like Moses went up the mountain. He received the commandments of God and he came down glowing. This is what I want to do. I want to trade this dull crap in for a glowing, beautiful, more beautiful than it already is, a glowing face coming down the mountain. And so he's going to speak to me in unselfishness. And that's what pure love is really, what am I living for? What are the means? What are the position, the money, the place, the power? What's controlling my actions? Is it self-interest or God interest? And then we have absolute love. I used to take from the world around me. I used to try to take love and prove that you love me and then prove that you don't love me. It's because I never had God's love in my heart. As soon as I had God's love in my heart, I was able to really understand what love is, and it is an action. It is breathed with God's breath inside of me, and his perfect love cast out all fear. The thing is, out of these inventories, I have to come into consent with God's love and go, this is the stuff that I found. I can't do anything about it. Please take it away. And then we have absolute purity. As I said at the beginning, this isn't just a spiritual life, but the spiritual life is one of a moral life. And so now we have a moral compass. We don't just get to write the rules of the road. We actually have God really transform our heart and start to write new values, principles, and guiding factors to our lives in a whole new sense of where we might not had any moral standard to different aspects of my life, my money, my relationships, all of that stuff. Now God's going to write this moral compass on my heart because I'm his representation. So putting that all together and hearing the voice of God, now I can enter into relationships in a healthy way. And so where in my life do I have unhealthy relationships still? Where have I fallen short in thought and word and deed? And so these are good questions into going into the relationship, really understanding the problem spiritual. If I have all of these issues in my life, one being relationships, and I have a messed up bunch of relationships, well, it's showing me that I have some spiritual sickness inside of me. There's parts of my heart that isn't connected to the love and unity of God. And that's what the Bible says. How will they know us? They will know us by our love and our unity.